Seattle is a West Coast seaport city and the seat of King County, with an estimated 662,400 residents as of 2015. Update. Seattle is the largest city in both the state of Washington and the Pacific Northwest region of North America. As of July 2013, it was the fastest-growing major city in the United States, and remained in the top 5 in May 2015 with an annual growth rate of 2.1%. The Seattle metropolitan area of around 3.6 million inhabitants is the 15th largest metropolitan area in the United States. The city is situated on a narrow isthmus between Puget Sound and Lake Washington, about 100 miles south of the Canada-United States border, a major gateway for trade with Asia. Seattle is the 8th largest port in the United States and 9th largest in North America in terms of container handling. The Seattle area was previously inhabited by Native Americans for at least 4,000 years before the first permanent European settlers, Arthur A. Denny and his group of travelers, subsequently known as the Denny Party, arrived from Illinois via Portland, Oregon on the schooner Exact at Alki Point on November 13, 1851. The settlement was moved to the eastern shore of Elliott Bay and named Seattle in 1852, after Chief Sayal of the local Duwamish and Suquamish tribes. Logging was Seattle's first major industry, but by the late 19th century the city had become a commercial and shipbuilding center as a gateway to Alaska during the Klondike Gold Rush. By 1910, Seattle was one of the 25 largest cities in the country. However, the Great Depression severely damaged the city's economy. Growth returned during and after World War II, due partially to the local Boeing company, which established Seattle as a center for aircraft manufacturing. The Seattle area developed as a technology center beginning in the 1980s, with companies like Microsoft becoming established in the region. In 1994, the internet retail giant Amazon was founded in Seattle. The stream of new software, biotechnology, and internet companies led to an economic revival, which increased the city's population by almost 50,000 between 1990 and 2000. Seattle has a noteworthy musical history. From 1918 to 1951, there were nearly 24 jazz nightclubs along Jackson Street, from the current Chinatown International District to the Central District. The jazz scene developed the early careers of Ray Charles, Quincy Jones, Ernestine Anderson and others. Seattle is also the birthplace of rock musician Jimi Hendrix and the alternative rock style grunge. History. Founding archaeological excavations suggest that Native Americans have inhabited the Seattle area for at least 4,000 years. By the time the first European settlers arrived, the people occupied at least 17 villages in the areas around Elliott Bay. The first European to visit the Seattle area was George Vancouver, in May 1792 during his 1791–95 expedition to chart the Pacific Northwest. In 1851, a large party led by Luther Collins made a location on land at the mouth of the Duwamish River. They formally claimed it on September 14, 1851. 13 days later, members of the Collins Party on the way to their claim passed 3 scouts of the Denny Party. Members of the Denny Party claimed land on Alki Point on September 28, 1851. The rest of the Denny Party set sail from Portland, Oregon and landed on Alki Point during a rainstorm on November 13, 1851. Duwamps 1852–1853. After a difficult winter, most of the Denny Party relocated across Elliott Bay and claimed land a second time at the site of present-day Pioneer Square. Charles Terry and John Lowe remained at the original landing location and re-established their old land claim and called it New York, but renamed New York Alki in April 1853, from a Chinook word meaning, roughly, by and by, or someday. For the next few years, New York Alki and Duwamps competed for dominance. But in time Alki was abandoned and its residents moved across the bay to join the rest of the settlers. David Swinson, Doc Maynard, one of the founders of doo-woms, was the primary advocate to name the settlement after Chief Sealth of the Duwamish and Suquamish tribes. Incorporations. The name of Seattle appears on official Washington Territory papers dated May 23, 1853, when the first plats for the village were filed. In 1855, nominal land settlements were established. On January 14, 1865, the legislature of territorial Washington incorporated the town of Seattle with a board of trustees managing the city. The town of Seattle was disincorporated January 18, 1867 and remained a mere precinct of King County until late 1869, when a new petition was filed and the city was re-incorporated December 2, 1869 with a mayor-council government. The corporate seal of the City of Seattle carries the date 1869 and a likeness of Chief Sealth in left profile. Timbertown. Seattle has a history of boom and bust cycles. Like many other cities near areas of extensive natural and mineral resources, Seattle has risen several times economically, then gone into precipitous decline. But it has typically used those periods to rebuild solid infrastructure. The first such boom, covering the early years of the city, rode on the lumber industry. Like much of the American West, Seattle saw numerous conflicts between labor and management, as well as ethnic tensions that culminated in the anti-Chinese riots of 1885 to 1886. This violence originated with unemployed whites who were determined to drive the Chinese from Seattle. In 1900, Asians were 4.2% of the population. Authorities declared martial law and federal troops arrived to put down the disorder. Seattle achieved sufficient economic success that when the Great Seattle Fire of 1889 destroyed the central business district, a far grander city center rapidly emerged in its place. Finance company Washington Mutual, for example, was founded in the immediate wake of the fire. However, the Panic of 1893 hit Seattle hard. Gold Rush, World War I, and the Great Depression. The second and most dramatic boom and bust resulted from the Klondike Gold Rush, which ended the depression that had begun with the Panic of 1893. In a short time, Seattle became a major transportation center. On July 14, 1897, the SS Portland docked with its famed ton of gold, and Seattle became the main transport and supply point for the miners in Alaska and the Yukon. Few of those working men found lasting wealth. However, it was Seattle's business of clothing the miners and feeding them salmon that panned out in the long run. Along with Seattle, other cities like Everett, Tacoma, Port Townsend, Bremerton, and Olympia, all in the Puget Sound region, became competitors for exchange, rather than mother lodes for extraction, of precious metals. The boom lasted well into the early part of the 20th century and funded many new Seattle companies and products. In 1907, 19-year-old James E. Casey borrowed $100 from a friend and founded the American Messenger Company. Other Seattle companies founded during this period include Nordstrom and Eddie Bauer. Seattle brought in the Olmsted Brothers landscape architecture firm to design a system of parks and boulevards. The Gold Rush era culminated in the Alaska-Yukon Pacific Exposition of 1909, which is largely responsible for the layout of today's University of Washington campus. A shipbuilding boom in the early part of the 20th century became massive during World War I, making Seattle somewhat of a company town. The subsequent retrenchment led to the Seattle General Strike of 1919, the first general strike in the country. A 1912 city development plan by Virgil Bogue went largely unused. Seattle was mildly prosperous in the 1920s but was particularly hard hit in the Great Depression, experiencing some of the country's harshest labor strife in that era. Violence during the maritime strike of 1934 cost Seattle much of its maritime traffic, which was rerouted to the port of Los Angeles. Seattle was also the home base of impresario Alexander Pantages who, starting in 1902, opened a number of theaters in the city exhibiting vaudeville acts and silent movies. His activities soon expanded, and the thrifty Greek went on and became one of America's greatest theater and movie tycoons. Between Pantages and his rival John Considine, Seattle was for a while the western United States' vaudeville mecca. Marcus Prataker, the Scottish-born and Seattle-based architect, built several theaters for Pantages, including some in Seattle. The theaters he built for Pantages in Seattle have been either demolished or converted to other uses. But many other theaters survive in other cities of the U.S., often retaining the Pantages name. Seattle's surviving Paramount Theater, on which he collaborated, was not a Pantages theater. Post-war years. Aircraft and software war work again brought local prosperity during World War II, this time centered on Boeing aircraft. The war dispersed the city's numerous Japanese-American businessmen due to the Japanese-American internment. After the war, the local economy dipped. It rose again with Boeing's growing dominance in the commercial airliner market. Seattle celebrated its restored prosperity and made a bid for world recognition with the Century 21 Exposition, the 1962 World's Fair. Another major local economic downturn was in the late 1960s and early 1970s, at a time when Boeing was heavily affected by the oil crises, loss of government contracts, and costs and delays associated with the Boeing 747. Many people left the area to look for work elsewhere, and two local real estate agents put up a billboard reading, "Will the last person leaving Seattle turn out the lights?" Seattle remained the corporate headquarters of Boeing until 2001. When the company separated its headquarters from its major production facilities, the headquarters were moved to Chicago. The Seattle area is still home to Boeing's Renton, narrow-body plant and Everett wide-body plant. The company's credit union for employees, BECU, remains based in the Seattle area, though it is now open to all residents of Washington. As prosperity began to return in the 1980s, the city was stunned by the Wami massacre in 1983, when 13 people were killed in an illegal gambling club in the International District, Seattle's Chinatown. Beginning with Microsoft's 1979 move from Albuquerque, New Mexico to nearby Bellevue, Washington, Seattle and its suburbs became home to a number of technology companies including Amazon.com, Real Networks, Nintendo of America, McCaw Cellular, VoiceStream, and biomedical corporations such as HeartStream, Heart Technologies, PhysioControl, Zymo Genetics, ICOS and Immunec. This success brought an influx of new residents, with a population increase within city limits of almost 50,000 between 1990 and 2000, and saw Seattle's real estate become some of the most expensive in the country. In 1993, the movie Sleepless in Seattle brought the city further national attention. Many of the Seattle area's tech companies remained relatively strong, but the frenzied dot-com boom years ended in early 2001. Seattle in this period attracted widespread attention as home to these many companies, but also by hosting the 1990 Goodwill Games in the APEC Leaders Conference in 1993, as well as through the worldwide popularity of grunge, a sound that had developed in Seattle's independent music scene. Another bid for worldwide attention, hosting the World Trade Organization Ministerial Conference of 1999, garnered visibility, but not in the way its sponsors desired, as related protest activity and police reactions to those protests overshadowed the conference itself. The city was further shaken by the Mardi Gras riots in 2001, and then literally shaken the following day by the Nisqually earthquake. Yet another boom began as the city emerged from the Great Recession. Amazon.com moved its headquarters from North Beacon Hill to South Lake Union and began a rapid expansion. For the 5 years beginning in 2010, Seattle gained an average of 14,511 residents per year, with the growth strongly skewed toward the center of the city, as unemployment dropped from roughly 9% to 3.6%. The city has found itself bursting at the seams, with over 45,000 households spending more than half their income on housing and at least 2,800 people homeless, and with the country's sixth worst rush hour traffic.